On this episode of The State of Happiness, we have Jen Murphy, a freelance writer and editor who travels the world telling stories and running in exotic locations. She tells us how she went from being an ambitious New York City publishing professional to quitting everything to follow her dreams. She also shares the reasons why you should quit your job right now. On this episode of The State of Happiness, stay tuned. Welcome to The State of Happiness. I'm your host, Leslie Juvin-Acker, Chief Happiness Officer at Leslie Inc., where we provide solutions for finding happiness for stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed senior-level managers, executives, and entrepreneurs. The State of Happiness podcast offers you conversation, inspiration, and ideas for helping you increase your happiness in the areas of your personal relationships, your career, your abundance, and your emotional well-being. So come along with us on this episode, and we'll help you get the tools, resources, and inspiration you need to help you find your own state of happiness.
Looking for a speaker for your next company event? Leslie Juvin-Acker is San Diego's expert in emotional intelligence. Captivating audiences with her insightful, motivational stories, Leslie draws on her 10-plus years of experience in career life coaching to provide poignant, inspirational advice for all. Highly regarded as an expert in the field of leadership development, Leslie is your spark for a positive company culture. Have Leslie inspire your team. Contact me, Anna Gomez, at 347-748-0513 to book Leslie today. Have Leslie speak at your next company event. 347-748-0513.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Jen Murphy. I really, truly appreciate you for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I want to bring you on because June is Employee Wellness Month, and our focus is going to be on business travel, the business traveler. And we have really brought on professionals who do travel for work, and we want to tell their stories. And I met you at Outdoor Retailer, thanks to Chris Sears, and I was flabbergasted by your story. I just thought it was so inspirational. It kind of reminded me of Eat, Pray, Love in a way, you know, and and I think that you have a fabulous story, and your photos are just beautiful. Your stories are powerful. And so let's just get to it. Let's talk about how we met.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. Chris is actually a high school friend. We grew up in New Jersey together, going to the beach, surfing, and it's great to reconnect with him after all these years. And, you know, I spent most of my life on the East Coast, but for the last 3 years have lived in Colorado, where I will say my quality of life has vastly improved since my New York City days.
I love that. So let's talk about what brought you to Colorado, because you were in New York and you were really climbing your way up to the top of publishing, and you decided things needed to change. Take us into that story.
Yeah, you know, I studied journalism in college, and my dream was to be a magazine editor, specifically for a travel magazine. And it's interesting, when you're younger, you have these dreams and you never really think they're going to come true. And when they do, you expect it to be kind of this like magical moment and, you know, the happiest point in your life. And for me, as I started to get closer and closer to my dream, I soon realized I wasn't the best version of myself. And that really throws you. So I spent, I guess, about 5 years working at Food and Wine magazine. I'd interned there. I went back and worked for them, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, but I'm very type A, and I love a challenge, and I found myself working until, 10 o'clock at night. I was working on weekends, I just burnt myself out. And I can honestly say it was the first time in my life, ever to this day, that I really let myself get to an unhealthy point. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating right. I was drinking too much. And I just had this moment where it was probably the fourth weekend in a row that I had worked. I came home to my new apartment in Hoboken, and it was snowing out, and there was a sign on the door that I had no heat or hot water. And I opened my door and found that my ceiling had collapsed from my burst pipe. And I literally broke down in tears and was like, what am I doing? So I went on Craigslist that night and found an apartment for rent in Maui. I bought a plane ticket and went into the office the next day and was like, I'm quitting. And my editor was so surprised. I think I was even surprised. And it was, it's what any boss says. It's like, we'll fix it. We're sorry. We know we worked you. And at that point, I was at a point where I was like, no amount of money can make this better. Like, I really need a timeout. And I was very lucky at the time because my editor-in-chief actually gave me a sabbatical. I think she also recognized I had burnt myself out. And, it's on both ends. I never spoke up. I should have spoke up more, saying, I need help, which you don't want to do as an intern ever or an assistant. But I was lucky enough to get, I think it was almost 6 months off, and moved to Maui, really relaxed, found myself doing yoga, thought about, what I wanted in my life and what was important. And Food and Wine took me back after that time. And I actually did believe that they would, do everything they said they would: hire me an assistant, give me a promotion, get me an intern. And they did. And I went back. I think everyone thought that I went to rehab because I came back very tan and blonde and healthy and glowing.
Oh my God.
But, that it was a very extreme way for me to have learned how to set personal boundaries for myself. And after that, it really taught me like when to speak up. I used to have this idea that I could get by on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, but more work's just going to pile up. So it really forced me to stick to healthier habits and make sure I had better work-life balance. So,
and how long ago was that?
Gosh, that was probably 10 years ago.
Wow.
And it was better. I had a great, probably 4 or 5 more years at Food and Wine as a travel editor. And then I moved to San Francisco to take a job at a startup magazine, where life got a little crazy because I was bi-coastal, which meant I was in San Francisco for a week, then I would be in New York for a week, then I would be on the road for a week. And, very quickly I learned, and I said to the editor-in-chief at that magazine, there's someone out there who will love this lifestyle, but it's not for me. Like, for 1 year I could do it, but it just wasn't the lifestyle I saw myself living.
Yeah.
And as I worked to get higher and higher up the ladder on the magazine chain, I realized I was getting further and further away from what I really love doing, and that's writing and storytelling.
Right.
Instead, I was going out to parties with the publisher and, flying to conferences. So it was a bit scary, but I decided to go out on my own and freelance, because I would really be getting to do what I love, which is writing,
Right.
Just without the, I guess, security of having a full-time job and benefits and, an office to go into every day.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who are listening who admire what you have done, probably have been through something very similar, if not the same thing, where they just burnt themselves out and said, I've had enough. I mean, even Anna here, she's our VP of development. She was in New York too, and she just, worked herself to the bone. And to be quite honest, sometimes people don't even know why they're working themselves to the bone. Maybe it's to achieve a certain level, maybe it's to get a certain type of money, but then you have the money and then you're not enjoying it. And for you, what did you come to realize was what you really wanted? I mean, lifestyle wise, in addition to telling stories, but what did you want to create for yourself?
Yeah. I think I've always been an active and outdoorsy person. Like I'm my happiest when I am by the ocean or in the mountains. And I started to realize, especially as I became more senior at magazines and had to go out more, the wearing the high heels and going to the fancy restaurants and schmoozing at the cocktail parties, just
Mhm.
it felt like an act to me. Like I could do it, but I was like, this isn't me. Like it's not
Oh,
what I thrive on. It not, and it's interesting. I spend part of the year in Maui, and being in Colorado, I network just as much. It's just a very different environment.
right.
So I think I started to realize what made me happy. I also, once you leaving New York, I think anyone who has lived in New York
Mhm.
knows this. Leaving New York is terrifying, and it's so
Mhm.
hard. It's like the hardest breakup you'll ever go through in your life.
Right.
Um, and
Yeah.
once you do it, you're like, oh my God, that actually wasn't that bad. And I can always go back. I joke, it's like, the boyfriend I always go back to.
Right.
But once you leave once and get over that fear, like, am I defined by my job? Am I defined by New York? Will people remember me if I leave my career in New York?
Mm.
It's scary, but it built so much confidence in me to be like, oh, I still am relevant, and I'm a happier version of myself. And if I miss it, it's not going anywhere. So
Right.
I've left New York 3 times, and I've gone back 3 times. Don't foresee myself going back permanently
Mhm.
anytime soon, but I think that's, I have a lot of friends who still live in New York, and it's the same complaint. It's expensive. You're always working. You're always exhausting. The subway, and they wish they could leave. And when you step back, it's like you really can. I mean, it's
Mm.
easier said than done, but it's always going to be there if you want to go back.
My gosh. You said something very powerful earlier about I felt like I was putting on an act and it wasn't me, because that's very powerful. I think that, I've coached tons of people and, helped thousands of people. And that's one of the common things that our happy campers experience is losing their inauthenticity of who they are. And in so many ways, lose themselves and they don't know who they are. And like you said, am I my job, and am I, New York, and, will people remember me? Will they know me for who I am? I think just as you tell that, even for me, I face those questions myself too, because, I run a business,
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to sell it. But it's kind of like when we met and you just sat down and, you were telling me your story. And I remember we suddenly started to get real about,
Yeah.
what's not, what's not like great about publishing, what's not great about
Mm-hmm.
podcasting, or, whatever, having a business. And you were like, you said a lot of, the things that you see in the magazine, it's all set up. The friends that are the friends of the person who's being featured, not even the
Mm-hmm.
friends, because the real friends are not even, as pretty as these people, and it was just like
Yeah.
this real aha moment, as I listened to you, because we have to put on a happy face and we have to, be our best, but not every day are we our best. And some days we're just
No.
tired. Some days we hear these negative things, our head, and we hear, when we're just trying to get through our head, let alone the day. And I just found that
Mm-hmm.
you were so very blunt and honest. And but at the same time, you said, I wish that people were more honest about how, ugly and difficult life could be, rather than just trying to
Yeah.
put a pretty sheen. So you coming in publishing, and making everything pretty, and now becoming a storyteller and talking about stuff, what do you think has changed for you in terms of those choices of going from pretty and polished to real and raw?
I think when I started in publishing, which makes me sound very old, like there was no Instagram.
Mm.
Social media was just starting out. And I traditionally worked for aspirational magazines. And in
Mm.
a way, aspirational magazines are basically what Instagram now is. It
Mm.
is something that is made up and you crave it and it's desirable. But I think back then at the heart, everyone knew, like, that cupcake on the cover of Food and Wine. Like when you cook it at home, it's not going to look that pretty. Like a
Right.
lot of work went into making it look that pretty.
Right.
But it's interesting nowadays on social media. Like I went through yoga teacher training last summer, and a lot of the women were younger than me. And to hear them talk about how they follow certain people on Instagram, and how they get, they almost get depressed looking at these people's lives because they think they're so perfect. And it's shocking to me. And I think that's a big problem in society today. I always say to my friends who see my travels on Instagram, like, my job is to make my travel look glamorous. I don't post the lost luggage. I don't post the missed flights. I don't post the bed bugs. I don't post, but that is the reality of it that oftentimes isn't shown. And I think more and more people are craving the real and raw. I think in a way that's why things like Snapchat are becoming so popular. There was a great use of Snapchat. It was either a year or two ago now, by two climbers, Corey Richards and Adrian Ballinger, and they Snapchatted their whole way up to Everest. They were attempting to summit Everest with no oxygen. And I wasn't a Snapchat person, but I became obsessed with following them. The whole reason they did it was like, we want to give people a real raw look at what it's like. And, it wasn't pretty. Like, they looked exhausted. They looked tired. They looked frozen. But I think people are craving that, reality versus having everything kind of glossy and pretty. And I'm hoping now, like with my storytelling also, just to get people to feel comfortable being honest. There's an amazing climber, Eder Passabon, and I'm working on a story for Outside Magazine about her. And after, she's very honest that when she was in her 30s, she went through a deep depression, and to the point she was hospitalized. And it was partly because, which I'm sure a lot of women go through, she was out summiting mountains and climbing, or you could be out pursuing your career while the rest of the women your age are settling down and having kids and getting married. And suddenly you feel like this outsider. And I asked her, I was like, it's rare you hear women so openly talk about depression. And she was like, well, it's, more people suffer from it than not, and it's something we should talk about. It shouldn't be stigmatized. And to me, that was so powerful, and I wish there were more people who'd feel comfortable, and I think it's starting to change.
It's interesting because a lot of people go, well, if you talk about it, that means you're complaining or you're getting attention for something negative. Oh, look at me. I'm sitting here crying and whatever. And yeah, I'm sure that there are some people who believe that the only way that they can get positive attention is through, a cry for help. But most people, and like I said, I work with a lot of people, and they are so embarrassed to even show a sign of weakness, and especially in the career realm, and especially as professional leaders, they don't want to even admit that. But I mean, geez Louise, I had a client who works, an executive in pharmaceuticals, and he was traveling all over the world, and he came in one day and he said, Leslie, I'm so tired, and I have a family and I have lots of kids. And he's like, I've got all these people depending on me, and I go into these regulatory, government things, meetings. And he's like, I'm tired. And I get on that plane, and when nobody's looking at me, I'm just crying. And I'm letting it all go. And, nobody says this when they're in the boardroom or when they're having their share meetings. It's these things are not happening. And my work is like, I'm championing in so many ways, like mental health, emotional well-being, because being a professional like yourself or like me, you are an entrepreneur, you're working for yourself, or you got people who depend on you, you've got deadlines, you got all of this pressure, these expectations, these things you got to do. And there's so many times we ask ourselves, will I ever make it? Will I accomplish all of these goals? And that can break somebody down. And we just pretend like that doesn't even happen.
I always call it superwoman syndrome. Like, I have superwoman syndrome, and I think I can take on everything. And sometimes you get to the point where you're juggling it all so carefully, and when you drop one thing, it just comes shattering down. And I've learned that 9 times out of 10, if you're honest about, your workload or family things going on, most people will be accommodating and understanding, like
Right.
9 times out of 10. But it's hard. It's hard, especially if you're a very type A person like myself,
Mm-hmm.
to ask for help or show signs of weakness, or to speak up. But I think most people have the same, everyone struggles with juggling, personal wellness, their personal life, family life, career. So I think more people can relate to it. It's just asking.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to ask.
It is hard to ask. I feel the same way. I mean, I was in one of my previous episodes, the miracle of asking for help. that's literally the miracle. And I go in and I'm staying with my friend. I'm teaching in Virginia Beach, 50 life coaches, how to build a business, how to really build your brand as a life coach. And I'm having a panic attack in that morning. I mean, for real, I'm crying and, I'm crying. And my friend, Peter Woodbury, who's, an expert in hypnosis and regression. I got another friend, she was a coach and, really coached in government levels, like high level of government. And I just walk into the living room and I said, well, I got 2 experts here and I need help. And I just start crying for 6 hours straight. But we just don't do that. And, and it's gotten to the point for me, like you, very type A, very wanting, not really wanting to control, but just want everything to just go along and not to inconvenience other people. And I just,
people pleaser syndrome.
There you go. Superwoman, people pleaser, you could call me whatever. And I just felt like I just can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore because I just can't. I don't have it within me and I have to be honest. And like I said, your story, I felt like I was listening to me at some point.
And it is, it's different. Freelancing was one of the scariest things I've ever attempted to do. And I thought about it for a very long time. I think part of that fear is failure. Because again, as a type A person, like you don't fail. Right. But everyone fails and you learn lessons from it. But I got to a point in my career, working at this travel magazine where I found myself writing about luxury hotels. And it was so far removed from anything I ever dreamt of doing. I wasn't proud of the work. I didn't feel inspired by the work. I didn't feel like my work was helping anyone. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm actually embarrassed to be doing this.
Wow.
And that was finally the point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this. And the feedback was so interesting. Like, I remember my financial advisor, who I thought would be pretty supportive, was just like, are you crazy? Do you have a backup plan? And that terrified me. I remember posting on Facebook that I was going freelance and I had so many supporters. And then one editor was like, well, it's great everyone's, being supportive, but let's talk about the reality of freelancing. And it's certainly not easy. And I certainly hustle and work hard, but part of it, and I think this is changing in the workplace, there are still those restrictions of the workplace and formalities of like, you have to be in at 9, you have to do this. Now, if I want to go to yoga in the middle of the day, or if I need a mental break from writing and want to go for a hike, I can set my own boundaries. That also means setting boundaries that I'm not, working every weekend, which is very easy to fall into the trap of. But it has allowed me a lot more work-life balance and to pursue things that really, make me feel proud. And that, that's something I feel so thankful I took a chance on.
Oh gosh, I am so inspired by just hearing that, because I mean, for me, thank you. but my question for you now is like, do you have any advice for somebody who wants to change everything, for someone who's burned out, like going back and reviewing your own files in your head of maybe I'd do this differently, or maybe I'd do this better, or maybe I'd say this? What would you say to this person who's listening right now going, I can't do this anymore. I'm burned out. I'm traveling all the time and I want to change. Maybe I like traveling, but maybe I don't like what I'm doing. What would you say?
I would say a lot of times we are always so focused on present and future. So it's like, what do I have to do tomorrow? What do I have to do next week? We never take time to pause and reflect. And it's hard to find time to do that when you're at the point of burnout. It's also very scary to say, I'm going to step away and take this week, take this month to really think about what I want, not to be juggling 5,000 things, but just to really focus on you. And I know that's indulgent for a lot of people,
Right.
but I've had friends who've gotten laid off, and I remember they thought it was the end of the world. And they were like, these few months to really have time to think, to get a good night's sleep. So I think it is, if you are at that point of burnout, if you can set some money aside and take, even if it's that week off, and really allow yourself to disconnect and think and give an honest look about what will make me happy, what can also realistically, like financially, what can I do to let myself pursue happiness and be able to be financially stable? And that might mean, I'm going to go back to school and waitress on the side at night. Here's a great example, which I feel so inspiring. A dear friend was a teacher, a high school teacher for years and years, and got to the point where her commute became too long. She's been priced out of the Bay Area, and she quit. And she's like, I'm going to spend these 2 months interviewing for jobs, all types of jobs. She was an English major in college. She got hired in her early 30s as the second, not even the first assistant, the second assistant to the president of this bank. And she worked her butt off for him, doing things that I used to have to do as an intern for an editor-in-chief. And now, after that year of, I joke, I call it slavery, but after that year of basically showing him, like, whatever you want done, I will do it. She has an amazing job at this bank, bringing in new wealth management. And I just look at her life now versus what it was, a year ago. And you're just like, one, she took a chance, and two, she believed in herself, which I think is a big thing. I think it's very easy to lose confidence when everyone is telling you no or you can't. But she is just thriving in this career that she never imagined she would have, because she knew she wanted and needed to change. But again, it was stepping away for those 2 months and really interviewing and thinking about, like, is this what I want? Does this have future growth? Will this give me the financial means I need and the growth opportunities I need?
Right.
So yeah, taking that time to reflect. And it's, again, easy to say, but it's like, when was the last time you turned your phone off, gave yourself time to really think about what's important to you and what you want? And I have, like, a really nerdy habit every year. Like, I start my journal writing, like, what am I proud of from the last year? What would I like to improve on? What are my goals for the coming year? And it's good just to check in with yourself and see, like, am I on path, or have I really strayed from what's important to
Right.
me?
Yeah. It seems like you had this moment of holding yourself accountable to the true Jen Murphy.
And people respect you for you. And I think that surprised me. I think when people see me now, I had a woman, which was, quite embarrassing, but I had a woman see me at a conference. It was the year I'd lived in Colorado for a year. And she was like, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but you look like a new person. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she's like, you just look so tired and so stressed out the last few years I've seen you. And I was like, God, that's terrible. Why didn't no one tell me? But that was really an eye opener for me.
Right.
And it was just, not having that constant stress, of work, so yeah, that was really an eye opener. And it's good to have friends you can be honest with. Like, I love when my friends are just like, you look terrible. You need to stop traveling so much, or please stop taking red eyes, or you've gotten too skinny. Like, I think that's really good to have those friends or family who give you that reality check, even if you don't want to hear it.
Yeah, you're so right. And the thing is that there are people who love us and who want us to be happy. And sometimes I have those moments where I remember I was in the kitchen and I'm stressed. I'm going, God, I got all these clients and I got, these deals going. I got 6 contracts going on at this time. And I'm just going, like, feeling like I'm going to fail everybody. And I don't want to let anyone down. And all of a sudden I just had this moment where I could hear Spirit say to me, you know, everybody loves you and they just want you to be happy. And if you're not making yourself happy, then you know what I mean? Like, what good are you to the world? And that was really like that moment where I said, you know what, I'm just going to have to relax a little bit. Because even though my business is happiness and selling the solutions for happiness, you know, I got to check in on my own happiness first. And that's then I feel like, you know, I'm not, you know, trying to sell anybody anything. I'm just trying to help everybody remember what I myself have to remind myself every day.
Yeah. And as bosses too, like we see so much more wellness in the workplace than we did like 5 or 10 years ago.
Right.
But I think it's so important for bosses to lead by example. Like I had a boss who without fail, any summer holiday weekend, she would choose to be at the office until 7 p.m. and there was that, or later. And there was that weird, like, I can't leave until the boss leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think bosses setting a good example of work-life balance is so important, and checking in and being cognizant and being open to those conversations. Like, hey, how is your workload? Like, hey, like, you know, if it helps to leave an hour early and finish like an hour of work at home, let's do that. Like being open to flexibility and helping, because I think at the end of the day, people will work hard and get their work done, especially if you do allow them that work-life balance.
Absolutely.
You know, I remember, this is terrible to admit because I don't like lying, but I used to say I had a physical therapy appointment or a doctor appointment when I would go to yoga at lunch. Because for some reason, like, you know, the doctor's appointment was acceptable, but back then, like, you know, yoga at lunch was not so acceptable. That's changed now. But again, like, I think it's so important to prioritize, you know, you have to be in charge of your own wellness and setting that example at work and saying like, hey, this is my lunch hour, or this, like, I'm going to come in the morning and shower at work if there are showers, is so important because only you can be in charge of that.
Absolutely.
And especially on the road, I get teased constantly for how anal I am about my workouts when I travel. And I have so many people tell me, like, you know, work travel is their number one excuse for falling out of their routine or falling off their diet. And it shouldn't be. There are, you know, so many ways. This sounds really dorky, but I carry a jump rope wherever I go.
Oh, wow.
Even if I can, it's like the easiest. I mean, I was just camping in Ethiopia and I would jump rope outside of my tent for, you know, 5 minutes every morning. And, you know, that is better than nothing. But,
wow.
you know, saying that you can't is really just an excuse.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to knowing your own routine. Even Toby in another episode, Toby Taylor, he said, you know, you got to know yourself and you got to know what you need and you got to self-regulate. And what you're saying is just, you know, dead on. For me, it's quiet because I'm clairaudient. I hear all the time. Not only do I hear people, but I hear spirit. And, you know, I'm like, oh, I need to get quiet. Like I joke that sometimes I wish I could get like one of those, like, you know, sensory deprivation tanks, because that would be awesome for me. I'm so highly sensitive and everything. And, you know, my house is big, so it echoes, and my kids are, and I'm like, I gotta go to the room. I gotta be quiet. And so it's definitely knowing who you are and what you need to feel that sense of wellness and to put yourself in charge of it. And as women, I have to say, not wait for anyone to give us permission.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, for me, like, it took a while to like know my triggers, like what is going to set me into kind of like, and like give me anxiety or send me into a panic attack. And, you know, recognizing those triggers and figuring out how to work with them. Like, I travel probably 2 to 3 weeks a month. And I used to be that person who, if there was a flight delay or flight cancellation, I would have a meltdown. For someone who does yoga, I shouldn't do that. And I would say more flights than not are delayed. And I've gotten to this, you know, place now. It's taken a lot of time where, you know, I take a deep breath. It's out of my control usually, and I make the best of the situation. But yeah, recognizing those triggers that can set you off, you know, whether that's taking on too much work, whether it's, you know, having a meeting with a boss you really, it rubs you the wrong way, just kind of mentally preparing yourself and being like, you know what, I could handle it this way, or I could handle it this way, and choosing which serves you better.
That is so powerful. I just love that. So when you get on the road, you're on the road. Let's move it forward to our last question. Is you're traveling, you're on the road, and you maybe get stuck in with a delay, or something happens, or whatever. What do you keep in your bag? What are your travel essentials that keep you grounded?
Yeah. Nowadays, in a way, like, almost everywhere has Wi-Fi now. But I really try to use my travel time to catch up on reading. So in a way, it's a luxury. I'm not a big TV person. So if I'm on a plane, like, I'm not on the TV, but I always have a great novel. Like, I love good fiction. So great novel, some magazines to keep up with. I always, again, like, I use my travel time for journaling. So I always have my journal with me. I usually always have some type of snack. So trail mix, fruits, always a water bottle that I can fill up with water at the airport. Yeah, that's pretty much what's in my purse.
Oh, okay. You travel pretty lightly.
Not a ton. I do. I always, in my carry-on, again, I try as hard as possible not to check luggage. I usually succeed, but I always want to have, my running shoes with me in my carry-on. So if I do get stuck somewhere, and a change of workout clothes. But yeah, I do travel pretty light. Like, I'm very low tech and low maintenance. So give me a good book, and I'm pretty happy.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll share mine. I told Toby I keep a scarf because in Chinese medicine, even in French culture, you see French people scarf all the time. If you keep your chest and your throat cold, it actually helps that circulation and keeps your immunity from drafts and getting any kind of bugs. So I definitely work on keeping myself warm. Unlike you, I like to keep some snacks because I get hungry and I'm very picky. I like clean eating. So
yeah.
When you're in the airport, they got, fast food or whatever. So I look for clean eating snacks, organic type of things, locally sourced stuff. I do have a water bottle as well because they don't let you in with water bottles anymore. So I just keep my water bottle in, and I'm really picky. So I like it really cold and refreshing rather than warm and gross on the airplane.
Yeah.
I definitely identify with where you put your attention on making the best of the situation.
Yeah. And that is, like, when it's out of your control, it's like you can stew over it and be upset, or you could be like, wow, I have these 2 hours, like, all to myself to read a book. Like, how many people would think this is, like, an absolute luxury? Or nowadays in airports, I'm home so infrequently. Like, I'm like, wow, I can get my nails done, which I won't have time to do when I get home. Or, a lot of airports now have yoga spaces, which I actually have started to check out. Right. A lot of airports have connecting hotels, so I'll go in and be like, can I get a day pass for your hotel gym, which 9 times out of 10 you can do. There are all these different things you can do to easily kill that time. So it's always, I found, not as terrible as the initial, like, oh my gosh, like, it's not going as planned. You just have to be open to an alternate plan.
Right. Spoken like a true business traveler, I have to admit. Thank you so much.
The one other thing I will say that is, I always forget this, it is in my bag. I think everyone who travels on long haul flights should have these. I always have my compression socks, which are just such a lifesaver for circulation. I almost always have them in my bag, and they have saved me on so many flights.
So you know what? I actually bought a pair for Frank too, because he would go to Hong Kong and China a lot in Europe. And I got him a pair. I think where did I get them? At Jockey, actually. This is not a plug for Jockey, but I actually got him a pair, and he liked them. He really liked them. Oh, and you know what? Now that we're talking about it, the one thing that I really love is noise canceling headphones. Like I said, I'm clairaudient, so I hear spirit, and that for me is the best, and the plane is so loud, so it really cuts that down. And I have tinnitus, so that really is a lifesaver. So that's my last bag thing. Now that we're talking about it. Oh my gosh, what a great conversation! I have to say, I was very moved again for the second time. I just had all sorts of feels after listening to your story. I'm so grateful that you could come on and tell us your story, Jen, because I think you speak for so many of us, and I just love your Instagram feed. It's inspiring.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Where can people reach you if you want to reach you for professional, or maybe just follow your story and talk with you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so my Instagram and Twitter handle is Jen Runs World, JEN Runs World, and that's my website as well, jenrunsworld.com. If you can't tell, I'm a huge runner, so try to run wherever I go. I think it's a great way to connect with locals and see a city. But yeah, you can follow my travels and my writing there.
All right.
But thank you for having me on. I really hope people do get inspired by this, and you are in charge of your own destiny. That is what I've learned over the years. So yeah, thank you for having me, Leslie.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much. And gosh, I hope to have you back on again soon.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully I'll see you back in Colorado soon.
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
It's 2:00 in the morning. You can't sleep. Your mind is racing, thinking about work, your career, your future. How can I get a raise? Why is my boss being so difficult? What am I doing wrong? What's keeping you up at night? If you had the answers to these questions, what choices would you make? Thanks to Leslie Inc.'s Happiness Dex app, Career Edition, you can have the answers to these questions. In less than 60 seconds, you can gain essential perspective and eye-opening insight to the questions that are keeping you up at night. Get more information about the Happiness Dex app at leslieinc.org/app. Get the answers you need with the Happiness Dex app by Leslie Inc. A many thanks to you, happy campers, for joining us today on this episode of The State of Happiness. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can join me at Twitter at Leslie Juvin, as well as follow at Leslie Inc. on Instagram, and talk with us at Facebook at Official Leslie Inc. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to leave us a rating and subscribe and share with a friend. As always, thanks for joining us, and remember, a smile goes a long way.